time together be joyous and uplifting. So, we're still with St. Francis of Assisi, and we have a short poem that we read before we left off last week. Heidi, would you read it again for us?
Sure. It's on page 50. Only love honors God. Only love honors God. That sounds as if it could be true. Or in other words, that sounds as if it could be true.
Right.
As someone mentioned last week, but surely everything he made must be perfect. I'll read it again.
Please.
Only love honors God. Only love honors God. That sounds as if it could be true. But surely everything he made must be perfect.
Now, coming from St. Francis of Assisi, we have to take this very seriously, it seems to me. But surely everything he made must be perfect.
Last week you said it's as if he's winking at us. Another one of those poems where
Yes.
It feels like he's doing that.
Yeah, it does feel like that to me. And of course, I forget which of the other saints it said, it was, but that wrote, "You cannot be what God is not." God said to me, the poet wrote, "You cannot be what I am not." So it's this is so hard for us to assimilate, this idea that no matter how it seems to us, everything is perfection. Anybody else have anything to say about that?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, Swam.
Sometimes I feel that that statement could become like a double-edged sword, so to speak. On the one hand, it is so reassuring to think that since we are also made in God's image, or we are God, so we are perfect, and it's very reassuring. But on the other hand, because we have forgotten who we are, and there's that inherent sense that we are perfect, but in search for that perfection, we create so much trouble for ourselves.
Yes. As Saint Teresa of Avila says, it is only in us that God is so lost, or is it confused? It is only in us that God is so confused that he asks questions. That's part of her poem, Every Prophet's Name. So you're absolutely right, Swam. You're absolutely right. That's why I say he's winking at us. He's trying to get us to hold two thoughts at once, which is very difficult. Thank you for that. Anything else from anyone? Okay. Cindy, would you read this next one? Of course, I am jealous.
Sure. Of course, I am jealous. We bless the earth with each step we take. And the firmament, too, needs our touch. Someday your tenderness will reach it. Look how the birds climb some invisible staircase and lay their hands upon him. Of course I am jealous when I too cannot do that. The seas waited long to sing. Not until we leaped out laughing was their birth of us complete. Tell me about your heart, my every word says. Speak to me as if we both lay wounded in a field and are gazing in wonder as our spirits rise. I'll read it again.
Please.
Of course I'm jealous. We bless the earth with each step we take, and the firmament too needs our touch. Someday your tenderness will reach it. Look how the birds climb some invisible staircase and lay their hands upon him. Of course I am jealous when I too cannot do that. The seas waited long to sing. Not until we leaped out laughing was their birth of us complete. Tell me about your heart, my every word says. Speak to me as if we both lay wounded in a field and are gazing in wonder as our spirits rise.
Those last few lines, does anyone have anything to say about what they might mean?
I have a thought about them. It brought up, those last lines brought very strongly up a song that was written about this a Civil War era, but it's a contemporary song. And in it, there are these two soldiers who are friends, and one is shot and is dying, and he is in that moment speaking his heart to his friend in a way that he's probably never shared his feelings. And he doesn't say much, but what he says is so beautiful and so profound, and it makes me think about that when we are dying, or believe we are dying, or we're with someone who's dying, all of a sudden it brings our heart and what it really has to say right up in front of us, right up. We can access it. And it's kind of strange that so many of us have to have something like that happen to really bring our heart open and shareable, but sometimes that's the case.
Well, it certainly does. What you just said certainly does follow what the previous lines are. Tell me about your heart, my every word says. Speak to me as if we both lay wounded in a field and are dying. And so it's that, tell me about your heart in that truthfulness of that last moment. I think you really hit on a key idea. This is a very mysterious poem. I mean, just the first couple of lines, the first couple of quatrain, a couple of just the first part. We bless the earth with each step we take, and the firmament too needs our touch. Someday your tenderness will reach it. And then he says, with the great humility so characteristic of him, the birds can do it, and he's jealous because he cannot yet do it. That is, touch the firmament with tenderness. Any other thoughts from anyone?
Well, do you think that when he says, look how the birds climb some invisible staircase, do you think he's referring to the trees tops, or is it just their flight that they can, fly high?
Bart, were you about to say something? No. Okay.
Could you guys hear could you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I heard you clearly.
Okay.
Here's the invisible staircase that I heard like I said before, there are no right answers to poems. But the invisible staircase was this that at one time, this was in the mid-1960s, we lived in Nevada City, California, which is up in the foothills of the Sierras. And I was working as an irrigator. And so I spent all day out in the fields. And there was this little range of hills in the fields where I worked. Very, very low hills. But there was a family of hawks that lived in the woods on those hills. And I would watch the hawk fly out of the trees and find a thermal rising air. And that hawk would get in the thermal and he would no longer flap his wings. He would just bank so that he remained in that column of rising air. And up and up and up and up he would go so that he could see, hawks have very, very remarkable vision, so that he could see a wide area. So that's the invisible staircase that I heard when I heard those lines. That ability of birds to ride those thermals up into, to very great heights. And that was a metaphor for him of touching the firmament. That's how I heard
I have another thought. I don't mean to be hogging, but anybody interrupt me at any time. The mystery of this poem seems to be the beginning is saying, we bless the earth by stepping on it and being on it. And at some point, it's like the earth needs our touch. And someday our tenderness will reach it. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but, and then he's saying, I'm jealous of the birds. I know that we're here, and I know we bless the earth as we walk on it. And someday that will have some higher meaning. I'm jealous of the birds because it seems like they can go and lay hands on God, and I don't feel like I can do that. And then the part about the sea waited long to sing, not until we leaped out laughing was their birth of us complete. Just makes me think of, evolution and
Yes.
humans finally coming out of, and this leaping out laughing and the seas waiting to sing, and it took a while, and here we come. We are meant to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard a lot of times to be here. But we are here. It's like it's part of this divine plan, divine play, whatever you want to call it. But we may want to just go straight up like a kite and get the string cut or like a bird. But we're here first.
Yeah.
And that someday your tenderness will reach it. I'm not sure what the it is.
Firmament. That's the way I
Well,
read it.
I know, but the firmament. Anyway, but that's kind of, and then the last part about, let's pretend that we're dying and kind of escape this, or at least be on the, pretend we're right on that edge so we can kind of step outside of the fact that we're landlocked, earth locked.
Well, let's just take a little poll here. This poem is mysterious, but does it move you? June, do you find this poem moving?
Yes.
Okay. Heidi?
It
Yes, June.
it does. It's very moving
What about it do you find moving?
because I guess that the divine is ever present, and the fact that he is, it's always such a glorious blessing that no matter where we are or how we are, we can always reach out to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's happening in this poem.
Very good, June. That's beautiful. Very good. Yes. It certainly is filled with the presence. There's no two ways about it. Heidi, do you find this poem moving?
I do find it moving. Certain parts of it, some of it, like you explained the invisible staircase, and so I know there's no right and wrong, but I get that a little more now after you've explained that. So I do find it moving.
Good. Bart?
Mhm. I do. Yeah, it's very moving for me. It's a sense of lying wounded in the field, in the in our incarnations, the sense of being wounded healers in the earth, walking each other home, as Ram Dass had said. I get a real, I don't know if it's a sense of jealousy. Well, that's the English translation. I get a sense of homesickness
Mm-hmm.
for what is home within us and without of us. It's a sense of homesickness that I hear from St. Francis. It's beautiful.
Beautiful and beautifully put. Thank you.
Thank you.
Swam, anything? Swam, do you find this poem moving?
Yes, Brother Shankara. I think I find the imagery in the, especially the birds climbing the invisible staircase and the seas singing or waited long to sing, and us leaping out laughing. It moves me in a happy sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just the, like I said, just the imagery of climbing the stairs to reach,
Yes.
and then leaping out laughing. So there's something happy that's waiting for us.
Very good. Very good. It's interesting that you mentioned the images. That's one of the things when I read this poem the very first time, maybe not the first time, but sometime early in reading it, like I said, it's a mysterious poem. And it put me in mind of the Imagist poets. And the Imagist poets, when asked, "What does your poem mean?" No, they would say, "No, don't ask me what it means. I ask you, how does it make you feel?" And so it's the Imagist poets were very not left-brained, and this poem seems to me not very left-brained. There's no it doesn't track from one idea to another. It just, as you said, it presents images one after another. But the cumulative effect is that it's very moving. And he confesses his jealousy, and then he says, "Tell me about your heart." And then, as Bart pointed out, this beautiful closing, "Speak to me as if we both lay wounded in a field and are gazing in wonder as our spirits rise." Cindy, any final thoughts?
No.
Okay, Liam, did you find this poem moving?
I found, like other people mentioned, certain aspects of it moving, like as a whole. Yeah, it's a little bit, and I guess though, that's just kind of like what our experience of life is, right? Like there are parts of it that are moving, but if I really am honest with myself, I look at at it a whole, I kind of don't get it,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There are parts of life that are really moving too. So, yeah, but yeah, like in particular, I found yeah, just kind of, I mean, there's just the first line, we bless the earth with each step we take,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of the way that starts off. It really, I feel like it kind of contrasts some of like the other images of of jealousy, being wounded, kind of being stuck and trapped. But it kind of, I think Swayam really uh, expressed what I took away from it, is that even though there's a lot of I guess maybe feelings of restriction, or maybe pain or suffering, that there's something good coming of it, not just for us but for for the earth.
Yes. And the firmament itself. Thanks, Liam. That's good. Katrina, you've been quiet, and I want you to know that there's no compulsion to speak. If you feel like saying anything, you're most welcome to be heard. If you feel like being quiet, you do not. There's no. There's no. There's nothing that has to be done here. So, is there anything you'd like to say about this poem, or anything that we've discussed this evening?
Well, I just got on a few minutes ago where you were discussing, so I didn't hear the poem. So I will just listen on.
Okay, thank you, Katrina.
You're welcome.
Liam, would you like to read the next one, in all things?
Yeah, sure. Give me a second to. In all things, it was easy to love God, and all that was beautiful. The lessons of deeper knowledge, though, instructed me to embrace God in all things. In all things, it was easy to love God, and all that was beautiful. The lessons of deeper knowledge, though, instructed me to embrace God in all things.
Yeah, I think the emphasis in that last line is to embrace God in all things. It was easy to love God and all that was beautiful. The lessons of deeper knowledge, though, instructed me to embrace God in all things, which echoes the first poem we read this evening. Everything that he has made is perfect, even that which seems to us not beautiful. We're so trained to be judgmental. This society trains us to be judgmental. And yet one of Christ's teachings, flat out, I mean, just couldn't be simpler words. Judge not, lest ye be judged. And I don't think he's pointing to any final judgment. I think he's pointing to what goes around comes around. If you are judgmental, other people, and for that matter, the universe itself, will be judging of you. And so that's what these saints seem to be saying, though. They seem to be the lessons of deeper knowledge, though, instructed me to embrace God in all things. Anybody else have something to say? That was my piece.
It looks like we have discussed either this poem or the same topic, in other words, about how it is easy to love things that are beautiful. But even though we hear, we get instructions, but it is difficult to love things that are not beautiful. For example, a cockroach, or I think we have discussed that in other classes or here in other poems. And it is difficult. I mean, we can try and force our minds to sort of feel that way, but it doesn't ring true.
Swayam, the idea of force our minds,
Yeah,
never, ever, ever,
right.
never, ever, ever. It's hypocrisy,
Mm.
and it's a distortion.
Yeah.
No, the saint here speaks to his own evolution. It was easy to love God in all that was beautiful. But then the lessons of deeper knowledge, which are the lessons that we actually learn, not that we distort our minds to adopt in spite of the fact that we don't really feel that way. No, St. Francis would say, no, no, don't do that. I'm sure he would. No, the lessons of deeper knowledge are what produce is being able to say, the lessons of deeper knowledge, though, instructed me, not forced me or compelled me, or in any way instructed me to embrace God in all things.
I think the Bhakti Yoga class, I think it was Swami Atmarupananda who recently mentioned this, which kind of also is inspiring. He was saying that there was somebody, like maybe a monk or somebody, who saw, as he was walking in the long distance, he saw this beautiful play of colors and a really sight that really felt to him very beautiful. And as he walked closer and closer, and when he came to that particular place, it was actually a dilapidated old building that seemed to be, I think, in the sunlight was giving out these different hues that from distance it looked beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing that appeared different at, I guess, to the perception.
Mm-hmm. But the point of his story seems to me to be that it is the same thing that we're witnessing from afar, from up close. So it's a dilapidated old building up close, but it's capable of being beautiful also. We don't, again, it's that lesson of judgment. Any other thoughts about this wonderful short poem?
Like how you have adversity in your life, and whether, I don't know, it's a health challenge or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear people say, well, that was kind of a blessing in disguise, because you just learned a lot of lessons through those struggles or that adversity, and a lot of times it does bring you closer to God. So it's easy to, when everything is going great, and to, when the kids aren't out of control, or a family
Right.
member, a spouse, when everything's clicking along fine, then it's easy to see the beauty and all that. But when things, you hit a curveball or something, I think that's when it builds character, and you just learn a lot of life lessons that way.
And all of those people who say those platitudes to you, it can be so wearying, particularly when you're not feeling that way in the
Right.
least bit at all. Instead, let them comfort you, let them sustain you, not try to teach you about what you should learn from your experiences in life. That will reveal itself. And one of the things that the spiritual teachers tell us over and over and over is be honest about who you are, about what's true for you right now. It's the only way to really make any progress. Unless we acknowledge who and what we are right now, then how can we see what it is that we want or need? If we're always pretending that everything's hunky-dory, even when it's not. as you just said, when you have a health challenge or the kids are out of control or your spouse is doing things you just don't understand or can't sympathize with. There's no sense pretending. We can listen to St. Francis and say, oh, I'm jealous, I wish I could feel that way. But oh Lord, I don't really feel that way right now. This is where we turn to the divine presence and ask for help in understanding and being compassionate with ourselves. When we don't feel holy in any given moment, and we will not feel holy in every given moment. Even the saints don't feel holy in every given moment, as we see as we read through this book. There are times when they are sad. There are times when they're distraught. St. Catherine of Siena says, there are times when I couldn't get out of bed. I know that one. So, sincerity with ourselves and sincerity with the divine presence. Anything else before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, I just have one thing, I actually had two things that came to mind. One was regarding the poem, and the other, though, was just regarding what you were just sharing, Brother Shankara, about I guess, being honest with ourselves. A friend of mine who teaches meditation always kind of warns about what he calls a spiritual bypass, which is like this kind of tendency that, people have created to think that oh, I'm not feeling a good way, and I'm a spiritual aspirant, so I'm going to just try to kind of meditate and try to bypass these uncomfortable or perhaps ugly feelings. And I find that I've definitely fallen in that trap, and kind of letting it, oh no, that doesn't bother me, because I'm trying to go on a spiritual path, even though my blood's boiling. And at the end of the day, it's like it doesn't really make anything go away, so it's kind of it's like I find that it goes away quicker when I acknowledge it, see, give it the space to be expressed and let it be, and but I think that it's kind of like a tendency.
When we're experiencing those unpleasant or ugly situations that you just mentioned, Liam, you're so right, and your friend is so right, that you cannot bypass them. We never understand, we never can deal with the effects until we understand the causes. And so as we acknowledge the difficulties, the obstacles, the impediments we're facing, then in that acknowledgement, there comes a calmness of mind, as you just said. They're easier to deal with. So then we can sink beneath the effects and come to know the causes. And there are causes, as science will tell us, and Swami Vivekananda tells us, and of course, every spiritual teacher in their way tells us, there are causes for every effect. And until we truly understand the causes, we're going to continue to experience the effects. But they become more and more dormant the more we acknowledge them, but don't feed them with anxiety and attempts to overcome them without understanding what it is that's really producing them. You said there was something about the poem itself that you came to point number 2 before you spoke about point number 1.
Oh, correct. Yeah, yeah, because point number 2 kind of came up as you were sharing um, before. But yeah, the thing, and it actually does tie into what we were just talking about, point number 2, in the sense that, this poem makes me think of the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus talks about, loving your enemies,
Mm-hmm.
and in particular the line, "For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do
Mm-hmm.
not even tax collectors do the same?" And then I'm kind of reading it in out of order here, but there's also the line of the um, uh, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. So it's kind of like this is, to me, it really is a very similar. I mean, maybe this, when he talks about the lessons of deeper knowledge, he might possibly be even referring to this directly. Now that I think about it,
He,
but
he very well may be. But the thing about St. Francis is he opened his heart to the deeper meanings of these things, and so was able to understand at a deeper level and see all as perfect. But you're absolutely right, Liam, and boy, was that ever a good contribution to read to us from the Sermon on the Mount. Beautiful. Anything else from anyone? Okay, well, this next one happens to be one of my favorites of St. Francis's. His wonderful playfulness and sense of humor. The Sacraments. I once spoke to my friend, an old squirrel, about the sacraments. He got so excited and ran into a hollow in his tree and came back holding some acorns, an owl feather, and a ribbon he had found. And I just smiled and said, "Yes, dear, you understand. Everything imparts his grace." Now, maybe everyone understands, but just in case they don't, the sacraments in Catholicism are the things that you take at communion: the wine and the wafer, meaning the substance of Christ himself. So that's what's meant by the words, the sacraments. The sacraments. I once spoke to my friend, an old squirrel, about the sacraments. He got so excited and ran into a hollow in his tree and came back holding some acorns, an owl feather, and a ribbon he had found. And I just smiled and said, "Yes, dear, you understand. Everything imparts his grace." Everything imparts his grace. In other words, everything is the substance of Christ. Everything is the substance of the divine being, which is this perfection that he gestures to. That's how I understand this. Mind you, this is just my hearing of it. It doesn't mean that you have to have the same hearing. But when you listen to St. Francis of Assisi, you can imagine he really was speaking to his friend, the squirrel. And the squirrel really did go into a hollow in his tree and bring out the acorns and an owl feather and a ribbon, his treasures that imparted to him this wonder and the substance of divine presence. So that's my story. Anybody else got anything they'd like to say about this wonderful poem? June, what did you hear here? What in this reached you?
Well, it's so everyday. Uh, it, meditation um, reveals some new piece of information, and it just reminds me of the times that I sit on the swing outside and the squirrels are out there. They can teach you a lot.
They're very good at having fun, aren't they?
Yes. They're also very good at storing up for the winter.
Oh, yes. They haven't survived all these many, who knows how many thousands of years there's been squirrels.
And then I think back to last week's poem about every creature has a soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just sit there for an hour and think about what and how their soul relates to God.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty simple, straightforward poem.
Yes, it is, isn't it? It's just a little story with such profound meaning. It isn't like that Imagist poem we read before. It's just, as you said, there's an everydayness about this. Every day for Saint Francis, who spoke to squirrels, and squirrels spoke to him.
Right.
Heidi, anything?
Well, I once spoke to my friend, an old squirrel, about the sacraments. I mean, can you just imagine in your mind's eye them actually having that conversation? It just cracks me up,
I can too. Yes, it cracks me up too, dear.
And so, like you always remind us, you have to take them literally when they say these things. And again, putting it in context, um, how he loved the animals and spoke to them and all that, I mean, yeah, very possible. I can't imagine that, but it is a fun poem. It is, there is depth there, but like June said, a lot of everyday topics here, but I like it. I love it too, but it just, I mean, it makes you smile.
Yes.
You always say, how do you feel? Well, I feel lighthearted and happy when I read this or hear it read, you know.
Good. Yes, me too. That's why I say of the poems collected in this book for St. Francis, this is one of my favorites of his.
And like he comes back out with holding an acorn and owl feathers and a ribbon, you know, it's like an offering, like the squirrel's offering, I guess, to God, you know.
Yes. Well, somehow they impart something to the squirrel, as the sacraments impart something to us.
Right.
And so, you know, and that's why St. Francis said, and I just smiled and said, yes, dear, you understand. Everything imparts his grace.
Yeah. You get it. Squirrel got it. Yeah.
Yeah. and in the same simple-hearted way that St. Francis had.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
And the same simple-hearted way that June was remarking on,
Yeah.
about how the squirrels are simple-hearted. Bart, anything to say about this wonderful poem?
Um, if I could, if I could share in the church, there's the idea. I was a catechism teacher. I helped people come into the church at one point, and the church basically teaches there are 7 channels of grace, which baptism, water baptism, confirmation by the bishop, the Holy Communion, go to confession, penance, anointing of the sick, and then marriage to a spouse, or holy orders, which is a priest or deacon, bishop becoming married to the church. And it can be really rigid and dogmatic about these are the only ways that you can receive grace, and it only comes from the church. And I just think this is so beautiful that the squirrel has his communion with the divine, and he comes out and shows Francis, look at the gifts of grace that I've been imparted with. And he says, yes, dear, you understand, everything imparts his grace. So being in relationship with the divine is not about exclusivity, about excluding people and excluding channels of grace. That's where I am coming from with understanding it.
Beautiful.
Ran into a hollow in his tree. Squirrels are notorious hoarders,
Yes.
and I was taught as a Catholic that you do everything you can to kind of bank grace. You do good works, you go to the sacraments or whatever, and you put grace in the bank. It's a very transactional thing. And so that you can draw on it in a rainy day, a spiritual rainy day comes along, and then you can withdraw out of your bank of grace.
Mhm.
And it's really beautiful to know that we don't have to live in that sense of scarcity, that grace is within us and all around us and always present. That the Lord says, give us this day our daily bread, which means every breath, every moment, be dependent upon the divine. Don't stock it away in a storehouse, because that's feeding this sense of lack and scarcity. That's spiritually, that's poison for us. We
Yes.
need to be breathing in the relationship with the divine.
And what you just told us about the church's teachings, and you used the word exclusivity.
Yeah.
You see why these mystics of all the faiths, the Islamic mystics, the Sufis,
Mm-hmm.
the Catholic mystics, these wonderful monastics, male and female, they got in trouble with the church
Oh, yeah.
They and the church had trouble with them because they said things like everything imparts his grace.
Mhm.
Not just those
Right.
7 things, but everything imparts his grace. And that's why I believe this poem is so moving, because it ends with that statement.
Mhm.
Everything imparts his grace, or her grace, if you're tuned that way.
Mhm.
Swayam, anything from you about this wonderful poem?
No, Brother Shankara, what Bart said was just so beautiful that I'm still absorbing it.
Good.
It's wonderful.
Cindy, are you still there?
I am.
Okay. Anything to add to what's been said? Anything
Well,
from?
I love this poem. I don't know that I have any new insights on it. I really like what everyone's saying about it. I just love this trust between St. Francis and his squirrel friend.
Oh, yes.
Uh, and it made me think of something that probably is just something in my own head and is otherwise a reach for people. But the thing about those of us who have lived with cats, sometimes they like to bring you a present, either a dead something they've caught or a toy, if they're indoor cats, and they deposit it and leave it for you. And there have long been theories about from the experts about why they do this, and supposedly it's either leaving you a gift, or some people say it's they think they're helping provide food for the pride. They're bringing you some food. But then more recent research into their behavior, and I was just reading this, says that it's really neither of those. It's a trust thing. They're bringing you, they don't need to bring you a present, or bring you food. They know that they don't need to bring you food. They are bringing something that is theirs that they trust you with.
Ah,
In other words, I'm bringing this toy and leaving it on your pillow because I know you won't steal my stuff.
mhm.
And I really, who knows? It's probably a combination of some of these, and it's also probably different with different felines. But I thought about that. I've read this poem so many times. I just love it. But I thought just the trust with the squirrel getting out his most treasured sacred objects
His
and
sacraments, yes.
bringing them out and displaying them for his friend Saint Francis, and because the squirrel probably never does that with anybody else. And I don't mean any person else, but even squirrels. I mean, these are his sacred things, and the fact that he brings them out, he knows that St. Francis isn't going to steal his stuff, and also that he's going to enjoy it and be happy to see.
Yes, that's the line. And he got so excited.
Yeah.
He got so excited. This is where this credulity that I have about St. Francis telling us the absolute truth of something that actually happened. He's talking to his friend, this squirrel, about the sacraments, what the sacraments are. And he got so excited. And St. Francis says, yes, you do understand. Your excitement was appropriate. You do understand. Everything imparts his grace. Which I just love to say those words. It's absolutely true that I love to say the words. Liam, anything?
Yes, I kind of been seeing, this. I feel like what this last line of everything imparts His grace really ties into the, this theme of seeing God or the divine in everything,
Mhm.
regardless of and kind of being um, I guess free of judgment or trying to kind of, I guess, put God in a box and say, no, this is a holy object or a holy thing to do, and that's not, like I've been, that's kind of really what's come to me most from this particular poem is just like, this theme that I've been seeing in all the poems that we read tonight about kind of um, refraining from trying to put God in a box. And
Yes, that has been a through line, hasn't it? That seeing perfection everywhere, seeing grace everywhere, seeing God everywhere. Beautiful. Katrina, anything from you?
Yes, I, I think it's a beautiful poem. And for me, it puts in perspective how much more is going on in this world. And I can only speak more for myself. It's I, as a human being, am focused on certain things because I'm like, okay, here is someone talking to a squirrel. The squirrel is understanding. And the fact that the squirrel is understanding shows the richness of the squirrel.
Yes.
It's like it's like he's coming to share something with the squirrel in my mind, and then the squirrel says, "Okay, hold on, wait a minute," and then he goes in and he gets and
Exactly.
he gets his things. It's like, okay, let me show you. I understand what you're talking about. So the squirrel already had it, the knowledge that God, the divine, whatever we want to call it, is in everything. And so, I think about that and I think, okay, and I'm concerned about what, and I'm thinking about what, and here is this communication going on between the two of them, and that the squirrel even knows that everything, the divine is in everything, and yet it's taking me time to understand it. It's like, okay, I need to talk to that squirrel too. As a human being, I mean,
Well,
just where I am, it's hard to see the divine in everything, and yet the squirrel understands. So I think it's a beautiful poem. Yeah.
we can hold that squirrel in our heart, can't we?
Yes.
We can let that squirrel speak to us in our heart. That's one of the reasons I find this poem so appealing. I mean, I just love that squirrel.
Yeah, yeah.
Say
I have a different appreciation for the squirrels.
yeah,
Yes.
and
So
and and I think it was Bart that said they're hoarders, but they're they don't just hoard acorns for the winter. They do, of course, because they need food, but they do collect things like the St. Francis mentions an owl feather and a ribbon that he found. Things that impart something to that squirrel,
right.
and St. Francis calls it grace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, dears, it's after 9 o'clock. This has been really sweet and enjoyable for me. Are there any final thoughts or words from anyone?
Yes, I think well, I nominate that we make the squirrel our official class mascot.
Okay, all right. Very good. Well,
I
you've got
second that.
I third that.
All right.
okay, very good. Everybody's
Okay,
voting
good.
yes. So, Cindy, let me then ask you, find a beautiful picture of a squirrel and put it in the chat for us.
Okay, I will. You mean right now?
No, not right this
Oh,
minute.
now
More-
what I can do is find a squirrel and then sort of put the poem over it, like,
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
lovely.
and
Yes.
yeah. Okay,
Okay.
will do. For the next class, I'll have it.
Okay, thank you, dear. Anything else from anyone?
I think I'll just be channeling that squirrel this week.
Good. Okay, wait, does us a world of good to channel something like that squirrel.
Yeah.
Hold that squirrel in our hearts. So Bart started to say the Lord's Prayer.
Brother, I'm sorry. I didn't hear. You want me to say the Lord's Prayer?
Yes, just
Um,
just just say the whole Lord's Prayer slowly and with as much meaning as your heart brings to it.
okay. Latin.
You can do it in Latin if you like.
Pater noster, qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tuo, sicut in cielo et in terra. Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, et dimite nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimitus debita nostra, dimitimus debitoribus nostris, et ne nos inducas in tentationem, sed liberas a malo. That's our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever.
All right.
Amen.
Amen indeed. And
Thank
so,
you.
yes, thank you. And thank you for the Latin. It has a music all its own.
Hmm.
So until next week, beloved. And I just think it's wonderful that Cindy nominated this squirrel as our mascot. Because it appears in the poems of others. The others of these saints have these conversations with squirrels and interactions with squirrels. It's interesting. So until next time, now for those of you who are so moved, tomorrow night we will study the life of Sri Sharda Devi, Holy Mother. On Wednesday night we have a class at 8 o'clock also on something called Jnana Yoga, the Yoga of Wisdom, a collection of talks by Swami Vivekananda. So, Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga Durga Durga. May you go in Mother's loving and protective embrace. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be cheerful. And may you have peace of mind. Until next time, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone. Thank
Hi,
you.
everyone.
Good night.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
night. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, June.
Good night, June.